All right, welcome back to the Haunted Beard. This is the first video in a series I'm going to be doing, reviewing the entire Halloween franchise. So today, let's talk about the classic 1978 John Carpenter's Halloween, the original, the very first one. Let's dig into it. So, I mentioned at the end of my last video, this is actually the only Halloween film I've seen out of the entire series. I know, it's crazy. I just haven't had much of a desire to watch any of the sequels. But I have seen this one. This is actually, I believe it's my third viewing of this film. And let's jump into it. So it's interesting revisiting older movies, especially classic movies, and watching them with this movie's got 40 plus years of history now on top of it, watching it with kind of a through a modern lens with a modern perspective. And I kind of just got thinking a little bit of like, is it fair to even critique it through a modern lens? You know what I mean? Like, obviously a lot of times you go back and watch old movies and you talk about, oh, is it dated and how well does it hold up and all that stuff. And there are definitely aspects of this movie that I think hold up really well. There's some stuff that feels a little dated, and how fair is it to grade it or critique it based on that? Because that it's a product of its time, and if it if it isn't fair to critique it based on a modern viewing, then why even talk about the movie? But if it is fair, it's like, well, it can't help that it didn't have technology that we have now, and it just didn't have the 40 years of history that we're now at, right? And so it's just different. A lot of things that are easy to critique on older films are, oh, that seems so cliched, or oh, we've seen that trope a million times or whatever. It's like, well, when this came out, those weren't, it's not the same thing. Those were fresh and new ideas that people hadn't seen a million times before. 40 years worth of movies, right? And so it's a little bit difficult. You can't truly fully place yourself in its kind of historical and cultural context back in 1978. But for what it's worth, from a modern viewer, this is just my take, and let's just talk about it. So some of the things that I like, and there's probably not a whole lot I can really say about the movie that hasn't been said before and probably articulated better than I'm going to say it, but this is my take. So one of the most noticeable things about watching an older movie, especially, really any older movie, but in particular this one, is just the editing. The average shot length between movies that are 30 and 40 years old compared to now is, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's substantially longer. There's just longer takes. There'll be less edits. They'll hold takes longer. And it just overall kind of has a more patient and slower pace. And Halloween does that as well. The first, 30 minutes of this film, actually, let's start at the very beginning. The very first opening shot, I think, is fantastic, and it's great. It is, I believe this may be the first film, if not one of the very first films, to use sort of the steady cam technique. And this opens with I don't know, probably a few minute long sequence, an extended take sequence, is a point of view shot from Michael Myers. We don't know who it is at the beginning, and it's just this great shot as this kid is outside looking in through windows, then goes up inside, grabs a knife, puts on a mask. It's all done in one take, goes upstairs, and stabs and kills the babysitter. And then he walks back outside, somebody's pulling in, and they say, Michael, they pull off the mask, and it's a kid, right? And it's like, holy cow, what in the world? We are in for something, something different, right? And it's just a great sequence that still holds up really well, just that extended take. And it's got just a nice kind of surprising reveal when you find out, oh, we were tracking a kid. It's a fantastic opening sequence, just a great way to start the movie, great way to kind of establish the mood and the atmosphere. Really effective. That opening sequence, opening scene holds up just great. After that, once we're introduced to Laurie and her friends, and we there's just a lot of there's a lot of sort of tracking shots and extended takes. A lot of this movie is shot in like mid-range to like wide shots. There's just a lot of tracking shots of her walking down the sidewalk and walking down streets. I feel like the next half an hour, the vast majority of it is just sort of camera tracking down sidewalks, just watching her talking and stuff like that. Um, just interesting the way that that's filmed. I just feel like today it would be handled so much different. But it just kind of lets these scenes sort of breathe. It kind of establishes the environment. You know, we're in Haddonfield, Illinois, but it pretty much just looks like any town USA, middle America sort of thing. And it really sort of establishes that environment really well. Um, Obviously the music is fantastic. I mean the theme song is iconic and legendary. The music is great. Um, Here's where I'm going to make my first minor critique, but I think it's possibly overused at certain points, and I'll expand on that in a little bit. But obviously the music itself is great and is very memorable. In terms of the editing, as I said, you know, he holds shots for longer. It's just kind of a more patient, slower editing, just longer takes, and some of that works really well in establishing realism. I think the longer you can hold a shot, it really just kind of immerses you into the world of the film better. You know, it gives you less of impression that you're watching a movie. You just kind of feel like you're just in the film, in the world of the film. And some of that extended takes and wider shots work really well, and some of it feels a little dated. Some of the sequences don't work quite as well. In particular, the scene towards the beginning when they're going to get Michael at the institution and Michael attacks the car. Just some of the takes there just feel a little dated. Just some of the effects and just feel a little old and dated. Again, make of that what you will. It's just a product of its time. It's kind of more of just an observation than really a specific critique. But there's some stuff that is great. You know, a lot of the stuff that is shown in this movie, I feel like, is shown from a distance, from a wide angle. There's later on in the film when Michael finally starts killing, and Laurie Strode's over watching the kid, I think Billy, and he sees the boogeyman right across the street, and it's just such a great shot, right? He's looking through the blinds across the street in the house, and it's dark out, but the house lights are on, but all you can see is just the silhouette of Michael Myers, the boogeyman, right? And it just framing things from such a distance, as I feel this movie does quite often, it really gives off kind of a mysterious vibe and a mysterious atmosphere that I think works really well. And it's just a great shot, right? It doesn't zoom in close, it doesn't provide any close-ups. We feel like we are Billy, and we are looking across the street and we're seeing the boogeyman, and we're like, what in the world is that? What is going on over there, right? And it's just a great shot. It's just simply a wide shot with just Michael Myers across the street, but we feel like we're seeing it as Billy would see it. We're right there with him, looking across the street, seeing his silhouette, and it's terrifying. It's just a great shot that I love. So let's talk about some of the kills. I guess spoiler warning. I mean, if you haven't seen this movie yet, I mean, what are you doing? Go out and watch it like right now. But let's talk about some of the kills. The first kill that I want to talk about is Annie. She's the first girl who gets killed, and it's just amazing how patient this movie is. It just kind of slowly builds and kind of gives a lot of fake outs, and when you think she's going to get killed, she doesn't, and it just really takes its time. You know, she goes back and forth to the laundry room a couple times, and you're just waiting and waiting and waiting. And there's a cool shot of her in the kitchen where the camera's just kind of panning back and forth, focusing on her, and Michael Myers appears through the door in the back, the glass door in the back, and we see him, and she has no clue, and then the camera pans, and then it pans back, and he's gone, and just this movie's got kind of moments like that where he is just this he's this omnipresent evil, right? I mean, he's lurking, he's there, but you don't know. And it just really does a good job establishing his sort of omnipresent evil presence, right? He's everywhere and he's nowhere and you can't see him. And it's just shots like that are really well done. I think my favorite kill in the film is Bob, who is one of the boyfriends. And I'm going to come back to my little critique that I made a minute ago talking about the music. And again, the music's great, but I think it's a touch overused, at least, and this is obviously just me personally, but I think that the two most effective or scariest sequences are when the music is not being used. And when Bob gets killed, it's silent. There's no music. And that's scarier for me. It's creepier, and it's more effective. It's such a great sequence. Again, it just takes its time. And it's only done just in a few different shots, right? He goes down to get beers out of the fridge. He's walking through the kitchen. He kind of hears a noise. The door opens behind him, and he's kind of looking around. Then he finally opens the door, and then boom, Mike Myers comes out, right? And it's so great. He lifts him up by the throat, pins him up against the wall, takes the knife, stabs him through the chest, and pins him up off of his feet, into the wall. And it's done in just a couple takes. They're wider takes. It's very quiet too, and not only is there no music, but just the actual sound of the kill itself is just quiet, right? It's just like, I mean, that scene would be handled so different today. I feel like just with probably shaky cam, fast editing, real loud. The music would probably be blaring, and but yeah, I just like the simplicity, and I wish filmmakers would use this type of approach more often. There's power in the simplicity, and I like how he doesn't use the music here. I think, and maybe this is cheesy, but sometimes silence is the scariest sound, and I think this sequence kind of shows that. At least for me, I think this is great. Obviously, the shot after, where Michael's just standing there looking at him, and he kind of does one of these where he's just sort of tilting his head, like it's just such a perfect little subtle touch that just is really creepy, and kind of gives a little bit of a, I don't know, a little bit of, it's kind of a character moment for Mike Myers, right? Like there's not a whole lot of those, and it's hard to do that when you have a guy who's wearing a mask and doesn't have any speaking lines, but little moments like that kind of really do something for his character. I thought that was great. The same thing, there's a silent sequence later on when Laurie Strode's in the house and Michael's after her, and it just cuts the music, and it's just effective. It just works. So there are elements to this that are dated. Again, I hate to be critical of Laurie Strode because I know she's horror. She's a horror queen. The performance feels a little dated to some degree. There's not a whole lot to her character, and make of that what you will, but just some thoughts. The character of Loomis is, and again, I know people love Loomis, so I'm probably talking blasphemy here. I'm critiquing Laurie Strode and Loomis. People are going to kill me, but oh well. And he does have some of the best delivered lines, some of the best lines in the movie. His character's a bit, I don't know, he's kind of a bit over the top and hammy, cheesy a little bit, but kind of more minor complaints. But look, guys, I mean, this is a classic, and I do like this film. I do think it's a good film. I do think a lot of it holds up very well. There are some dated aspects to it. But it's a classic, and I respect the heck out of it. I appreciate it, and the horror landscape would look very different if it wasn't for this movie. And so it's an important movie, and it's one. I mean, if you haven't seen it, I mean, you gotta see it. So that is Halloween. The grade for this is kind of irrelevant, but you know, I'd probably be like a 7 out of 10 or something like that. That's just, again, that's not trying to be objective. I understand this movie is a classic, and you know, its importance, its significance is a 10 out of 10. I mean, it's, you know, it's a classic. But I guess just kind of on my personal enjoyment level, I'd probably be somewhere around a 7. But it's a good film. I will return to it. I'll watch it again. I do enjoy it. So that is John Carpenter's Halloween. That's the first video. Next up is Halloween 2. So stay tuned for that next time on The Haunted Beard, and we will see you then.